Have you ever wondered if big government and big business have your best health interests at heart? Hello and welcome to the Chatting Fit podcast. Today we have a very special guest for you. His name is Brian Sanders and he's producing the documentary called Food Lies. He's got incredible revelations about nutrition, about health, about the industry that is perhaps at times not best suited for the health of the individual, perhaps at a population-wide basis maybe, but he's uncovering a whole load of truths that big industries and big organizations don't want you knowing about and don't want you talking about. Please do hit the subscribe button and the alerts bell so that you won't miss any of these new videos coming out and any of these expert interviews that we make. So with any hope this interview won't get censored, but who knows? As long as we don't step on Mr. Kellogg's toes, then all should be well. All hail Mr. Kellogg's. If you have a moment, do check out Brian's Instagram page at Food Lies, his YouTube channel, and his podcast, Peak Human. Try and get to it before it all gets completely censored by the higher ups. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's hear from Brian. Okay, Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Ben. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about your background and what you do today?
Sure. I have a weird history because I started as a mechanical engineer and now I'm in the health field full time, trying to help people figure out diet and lifestyle, which is actually pretty simple, but super complicated in the modern world with all this conflicting information. And well, everyone does have their own idea about diet. And I guess, it's not super straightforward, but maybe today we'll break down why I think it's simple and why I do think it's straightforward. So I do that in many ways. I do that with a documentary series called Food Lies, which we've been working on for over 5 years. So that's been a whole journey, kind of started me off, led me down some crazy paths, allowed me, just to quit my job and do this full time. And around that, I've built other things. I work with Dr. Gary. We call it Sapien, and it's like a health program and a health center in Los Angeles. I do Nose to Tail, which is a regenerative meat company, and we get meat out to people in the US, and we do some other products and use the whole animal, right? So this all plays into human health and how we can not only help our own health, but help the world produce food better. So that's another thing. Using the whole animal is important to me, getting into regenerative ag, which we can talk about. So that's kind of the solution to jump ahead to the film, which we'll get into all this. But the ending of the film, people were like, okay, great. So meat is healthy, but I thought it ruins the environment. And we're like, no, it does not. It can help the environment. And so we get into that. And what else do I do? Oh, I even have something here in Austin. I have a physical center called the Sapien Center, where it's a health and wellness place. And there's a little gym and, cold plunge and sauna. And we do events and we get people connected. And really my whole goal is to bring all these things together for online and offline. So that's kind of why I started doing this here in Austin, is getting people together in real life, because the internet, well, it's getting censored lately. And another thing we can talk about is there's a lot of forces against us. So we need to just work together, get into small groups. Almost going back, all of these things we're talking about is kind of going back to knowledge and practices humans have always known and had. And, that will touch food and diet and lifestyle and all that, but also just the simple fact of living in tribes. Not that we have to live in tribes again, but there's, sort of metaphorical tribes that people are creating. And I think it's great to be in person and have that community.
100%. I mean, the way I came across you, I mean, you've got a lot of strings to your bow there, a lot of things that have obviously emerged, like, because you've gone away from, it was mechanical engineering, you said, right? So you've gone away from there and like, seems like this explosion of sort of different health avenues has come out for you. But I just wanted to focus, because I first came across you on Instagram with your Food Lies account. And I was like, hang on, there's a lot of stuff in here that I kind of had an inkling that it was going on. I started speaking to more carnivore doctors, and I started to see, a bit. I tried veganism for a short time, very short time, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, there's a lot of stuff that's being spouted in the media that's, sort of mainstream media health versus what you were saying on Food Lies, which again goes down a sort of carnivore avenue and a sort of paleo avenue, and around, having whole foods, including animal fats, limiting grains, these different things that is sort of and the opposite to what the media is saying. So, I mean, can you just give us a bit more of an idea about what the Food Lies documentary is exactly about, and what your main message is?
Yeah, that's some of my messaging right there. It's just opposite of what's been out there, what the mainstream is telling you. And yeah, the Food Lies Instagram is another thing I do, just social media, YouTube, stuff like that, to get the word out while we make the documentary. So the documentary turned into a series, 6 parts, and we're trying to tell the entire story of what should humans eat. Like, why are we so unhealthy? Why, like, no one wants to be fat and sick, yet here we are, right? The world's a mess. There's all these figures out here. 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. Now it's up to 93% with a newer study. Westernized
Wow.
countries around the world are kind of the same, and they're following our footsteps. So it's a very complicated thing for the world at large to figure out. Yet some people have figured it out pretty
Mm.
easily because, like I said, they just go back to nature. And you mentioned actually kind of the 2 biggest messages of the film and of everything I do is that animal foods are good, processed foods are bad, right? This is just such a simple message, but that's actually the opposite of what they push.
Mm.
Because people think, well, people know junk food is bad, right? If you're just like, oh, what, like a Twix bar or, a milkshake or, whatever, some fast food. Everyone's like, yes, I know that's bad. But there's this whole other area of foods that are actually highly processed that people don't know are bad.
Mm.
And that's all, like you said, wheat, grains. It's like most of the foods out there in the grocery store are just different combinations of grains, sugar, and seed oils.
Mm.
And
So,
not many people know that.
so would you consider, so when you think of things like bread, like that would be considered like that's still highly
Oh, it's a
processed, right?
processed food. That's terrible for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
It's terrible. I mean, there's a possible way that you can make it better for you if you're getting like really good ancient grains, and maybe
Mm.
you're like growing them yourselves and grinding them and fermenting them, and doing like a sourdough for 3 days. No one does this,
Mm.
and this is, I guess, what people used to do, and we could get by eating bread. But no matter what, bread is not a health food at all. It's one of the biggest fake health foods out there. Everyone's
Mm.
eat your whole grains, eat your whole grains. Humans, I don't know. I go back and forth on how bad they really are. I just really don't think humans are meant to eat grains. They're
Mm.
seeds of grasses. I just did an interview for the film with this guy, Dr. William Davis. He wrote the book Wheat Belly. He's been
Mm.
around for over a decade, just talking about all of these proteins and gluten, people know about, and there's like
Mm.
amylopectin and these certain things that are in grains that just screw with our gut and screw with even our dopamine receptors, of like sort of make like addicting. It's
Mm.
like people want to just keep eating bread, and it's like why people can't give up bread. And it's like,
Yeah.
I get it. It has all these different proteins and different amylopectin, like these things in it. And I don't know. I just don't think it's what humans should be eating.
But why? How have we got to this stage where like so much of our diet is based on it, and even like the main health authorities? Because I don't know, you guys obviously have the FDA in the States,
Mm-hmm.
and we have the NHS and some of these big sort of government bodies that are giving information, and one of their main things is the Eat Well plate. And it's got like the basis is like breads, grains, breakfast cereals. And then on from there, it's sort of telling you to have low fat spreads,
Mm-hmm.
and, limit your animal products. And this is coming from the positions of authority, supposedly, who are meant to have all access to the best research, the best doctors, the best scientists, to be able to tell us how to live a healthy lifestyle, and how to have a healthy diet as on a population-wide basis. So how have we got to a stage where, you know, from what you're saying, that this health information is incorrect?
You actually said the perfect phrase, on a population-wide basis. That's kind of where the problem breaks down. So I did a presentation at a conference called Exposing the $1 Trillion Agenda Against Red Meat. And I kind of went deep dive into what you're talking about. Why did we get this information? Why is it so wrong? Why is it so backwards? And I came to some conclusions through that research, and it's kind of, it's a long story. So we'll try to get into different pieces of it. But I think going back to the highest level, or the deepest level, it's because we try to do things on a population-wide basis, and usually that's never good for the individual, right? So if you want to start from the top, like if you try to do education systems, monetary systems, food systems, healthcare systems, medical systems, they all really don't work well for the individual on that big of a level, right? When you try to do something on a population-wide basis, it's at the expense of individuals' health, even though that's the opposite intention. And people are like, yeah, but that doesn't make sense. Why? You know, they're like, they can push back on that. I'm like, okay, well, the US spends the most on healthcare, and we're one of the last for developed countries. You know, we're like, very much out of all the developed countries, we're so far at the bottom.
But it's not even working on a population level then. It's not working on either levels.
Yeah, same thing with education system. We have such a bad education system. Like there's so many countries that are that spend less on education and are way ahead of us. Like, why? And I mean, it's how far back do you want to go? It's just how, I think that's just how kind of the world works. Once we domesticated grains, it allowed certain people to become super wealthy. There was this accumulation of power and wealth from stockpiling grains and taxing them. And that's when you first went away from more egalitarian tribal living, where everyone was, you know, it was more equal, to pharaohs and slaves of Egypt, right? And it was just like, okay, well, let's get all these grain, we'll feed all these slaves grains, and this power disparity became gigantic, right? This almost like godlike power of the pharaohs to just the peasants. So I think that extended throughout history, and there's always been those kind of power dynamics, and it's always kind of been just the kings and the ruling class, and then down to the everyday people, and they're just kind of making decisions like, how are we going to keep these people alive? And a lot of times that happens. Well, it's like, well, we can eat grains, it'll keep you alive. That doesn't mean you're gonna thrive, it doesn't mean you're gonna be healthy, but that's not what they're dealing with, right? At the population level, you have to deal with things like, how do we keep people alive? And so you could zoom ahead to the 1950s, when this low fat, low meat, you know, high grain diet got invented. And again, you can try to figure out if this was kind of orchestrated, or if it was just an accident. We did some bad science back then. And, you know, I'll look at both sides, right? Because I don't want to say everything's like some grand conspiracy, but it always seems to end up in the favor of gigantic corporations and giant, you know, call them whatever you will, the establishment, the ruling class, the people that own the medical system. You know, there's people at the highest level that you know, you don't even know about, right? That have billions and billions of dollars that orchestrate things and have investments in all of these things, and from the medical system to pharmaceuticals to the big food to big everything. And so it always seems to be in their favor. You know, it's like, oh, well, we thought that animal fat's bad, even though we ate animal fat for all of history. So now we can, you know, shove in a bunch of cheap sugar and grains and vegetable oils that are way, way cheaper, that are shelf stable, that lasts forever, and it benefits them. We can make so much more money. So you know what I mean? Like, when you look back, 100%. It's like, why is it always in their favor?
Yeah. I mean, some would argue that they just capitalize on, you know, a latest bit of research, and then they try and make a product that fits in that basis, and then they try and go from there. But you'd think that over time, you can see, I mean, you posted something on Food Lies just the other day where it was a correlation of, as the amount of animal fats and animal products, fats from animals, has gone down, and the amount of plant plant
Plant
fats or
fats.
veg
Yeah.
has gone up, we've had the corresponding, I mean, you can't say correlation is causation, but the corresponding, disease trend line going up as well.
It's
So
well, sorry, just to jump in. It's almost you can't say correlation is causation, but it actually goes further to say reverse correlation shows that there isn't causation, right? So if they're saying that animal fat's bad for us and that's severely going down, yet all the disease and obesity is going up, that actually goes a lot further in disproving that idea.
that's a good point. I hadn't seen it like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of crazy that this message is still being beaten down and beaten down, beaten down. And then, like you say, then we start feeding in with the sustainability aspect, where it's like, well, animals are bad anyway because they're bad for the planet. And, it's this sort of reinforcing cycle where they're just looking for something to demonize sort of animal fats. And I wonder if I can get your take on why that is. I mean, I hate the word they, do corporations want people to be unhealthy? I mean, is that it? Or what's driving this? Is it just profit?
Well, profit and power drive everything. That's kind of one or both, right? Either or both. And yeah, I think it is. It's some of it is this like it's hard to turn around the ship. You know what I mean? It's like if you have this massive container ship, it's hard to turn it around. And that's what's going on here is there's massive industry. So part of it's just the momentum of this, but part of it is, yes, they'll always take advantage of some sort of new study or new, some of these are bought and paid for. Some of them are questionable because there's so much other science out there that kind of disproves it. Yet they'll push the stuff that holds up their agenda and narrative. So I don't think there's pure evil people out there or like corporations or that they're just, we're going to screw over everyone and we don't care about anything. It's kind of like, I don't know if it's the blinders on where you're like, oh, well, theoretically, if you just count your calories and you eat less, move more, and, you can eat the bread and low fat food. And, technically some people can lose some weight on that and do okay so that they do have something in their corner. So they think in their head they can sleep at night. Or I'll use example of like Coca-Cola, the CEO of Coca-Cola, or the CEO of Monsanto. Like they think they're doing a good thing. They're like, hey, I'm providing a great beverage that people like. And Monsanto's like, yeah, I'm helping, make grains and all these agricultural products easier to grow. But and they find a way to justify it in their head. You know what I mean? But it's like it's a happy accident. It's like, oh, and I happen to make billions of dollars. And like Coca-Cola guys like, yeah, people just didn't drink so much Coca-Cola. If they only had, one every couple days, everyone would be fine. But that's like not how reality works.
Well, that's the classic shifting of responsibility, isn't it? It's, it's not our fault as corporations, it's your fault for buying it. That's, you're in control of your body. And to a certain extent, there is a truth to that, but it's the question of how do you expect someone who's, working busy jobs, working 9 to 5s, has kids to take care of, to discern what is the correct information, especially when there's so many of these figures of authority. You've got athletes pushing breakfast cereal, different sports teams appearing on the front of breakfast cereal boxes, and like all of these, I used to be terrible for it, having these like cereal protein bars, and thinking they were healthy, just laden with sugar. And so, I mean, I don't blame many people for buying this stuff, but you just wonder when, these rates of diabetes and pre-diabetes going just exploding. And you just wonder when we're going to get to a situation where you go, hang on, like nearly all of the information from the main health authorities isn't having a positive effect, isn't having the effect that we want. So I don't know whether when you get that breakdown of trust, or whether you think that's happening at the moment, or.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems so bad. Like, yeah, I question that a lot. We've tried this for over 50 years and hardcore for, well, I guess 40 years. 1980 was when these dietary guidelines really came into effect. And that's when the uptick in obesity and disease is right when in 1980, you can
Mm,
see it's kind of like there's a sharp uptick so in the US. So I don't know. Yeah, that's my question.
mm,
When are people going to understand this? It's like it isn't working. It's failed, and people want to double down more. And
mm,
back to its personal responsibility. I do believe in personal responsibility, and but there's a certain level where they're playing both sides of this. So say Coca-Cola, they're playing the like, hey, we're just a product, and you can have your own personal responsibility to not drink it. Yeah, then they're also funding something called the Energy Balance Consortium, I think it's called. And I don't think it's still around anymore, but it was trying to push the narratives to the public, right? It's about the education part, like you're saying, right? There's
mm,
the physical products, and like you can buy these. And I'm for free markets, right? Like if I want to buy a pizza, I can buy a pizza. I just choose to not get pizza that often, right? So I'm okay with Coke existing,
mm,
right? But then they also fund all of these fake research consortiums that say all it is eat less, move more. That you can all calories are the same, and that you just have to eat less, move more, and has nothing to do with how bad our products are. And then they push out this information, and that's why you're saying yes, everyone is so confused, and there's so much conflicting information out
mm,
there at the highest levels of the health authorities, because it's all funded and pushed by the same people. So then that's when it's a problem, right? That goes beyond personal responsibility when you're looking at these large scales. And of course, if every single health authority is across the world is saying the same bad information, that everyone's going to believe it and then not be able to balance their calories
mm,
because they're eating the wrong food, right? Which is a whole other discussion of like why a calorie is not a calorie and why you can't just eat less of the same bad foods.
mm. And just before we go, like as we go away from, or I just want to touch on what exactly is, in your view, the proper diet. You know,
Mm.
we're bad mouthing we're not bad mouthing, but we're highlighting that perhaps the advice that we're getting from the main authorities isn't correct. So what is the correct advice?
Yeah, no, it's good to just lay it out there. I think this is completely proven on all sides. That's what I try to do, is look at all sides. I kind of was in a little bit of a camp. I don't like to be in camps like carnivore. Even I don't even like the term carnivore, because I'm not a carnivore and I don't promote carnivorous diets. I promote animal-based human nutrition like normal, right? So if you look at all sides, you can kind of come to a general framework of what humans should eat. And it's what we've always eaten. And you mentioned paleo before. Paleo is a pretty good framework. It's not the end all be all, but looking to the past is something we should be doing. And if you can if you can confirm it with modern science, then it makes sense. That's what I'm saying by all sides. You can look at what we ate in the past. We can look at our health and how healthy we were and how we actually lived long and were stronger and taller and our brains were bigger before we invented grains and agriculture. So we can look at the past, we can look at modern science and say, okay, what do these new studies show? And those pan out too, that red meat, there's huge 5 studies in the Annals of Internal Medicine that just please say that red meat does not cause cancer. You know, they look at the meta-analysis and they just basically said, you do not need to limit your red meat. And that, you know, the previous information was wrong. No one heard about it, right? This wasn't big news. I was trying to talk about it. This was in 2019. So you can look at modern science. You can look at just case studies, doctors, what's going on. It all lines up that I know thousands and thousands of people and doctors that are doing these more animal-based whole foods diets and lifestyles, and it's been proven out to lose weight, reverse disease, get off medications, all that stuff. So there are papers, there are case studies, there are anecdotes, there is all of human history. There's just looking at biochemistry. If someone wants to like look at the biochemistry of how human bodies work and how they run, you know, this is all confirmed. So all confirmed around animal foods, nose to tail. We're talking beef, like red meat, absolutely great for us. Ruminant meat, which is bison, you know, lamb, anything, you know, that eats grass with hooves, that type of thing. Fish, all kinds of seafood, shellfish, eggs, fat, dairy, grass-fed dairy, especially raw dairy, raw cheese. So all of these animal foods, and I'm saying nose to tail too, not just eating the muscle meat. You know, for all of history, we ate the bits and pieces. We ate the, you know, bone marrow. We would eat the organs and liver, so much good nutrition, liver and heart and kidney and all these other bits and pieces that some people still eat. Historically in the UK, I mean, they had kidney pie, and
Oh yeah.
there's all kinds of stuff, and people
Yeah.
would eat the organs, and this is what your grandparents ate. And my
Mm.
grandpa would eat liver and onions. It's like once a week, my grandma would cook him liver and onions. That was a thing. And it was for a reason, because there was great nutrition in it, and it has all kinds of things that you're not going to get in your normal diet. So the foundation of all of human diets for all of history has been animal foods, nose to tail, right? Eating all the bits and pieces, even eating the whole animal, like, well, shellfish, you eat the entire creature, you're getting all the nutrients. An egg, you're kind of eating an entire animal, like the building blocks of a whole animal. And then to fill in the rest of your diet is whole foods. And there's a spectrum of good, anti-nutrients and plants that are healthier and maybe unhealthier for us. And so I like to stick to the healthier ones. And that's what a lot of these carnivore doctors are pointing out. They're like, hey, even stuff like kale and spinach that everyone's touting as superfoods, they actually are super high in oxalates and other anti-nutrients that not only block nutrient absorption, so you're actually not getting the vitamins and minerals you think you're getting when you're eating them, but they will cause other harm in your gut. And that, they're rough on your gut, and there's many other things going on with them. Or like gluten, people know that, some people are gluten intolerant. Well, it's like, now I think everyone's sort of gluten intolerant in some way, just people don't know it. And that these glutens could, cause problems in your gut, cause leaky gut, cause these different proteins to go into your body where they're not supposed to be, basically, and cause harm. So when we're talking about plants, even whole foods, there's a spectrum of what whole foods are better. And I think I'm sticking to more fruit and tubers, which is what we've eaten for all of history. Again, a lot of these plant foods are brand new. People don't understand that kale is not something we've been eating for very long. It is very new. Like even like broccolini like came out like 10 years ago. Like there was no such thing as broccolini. Now it's like, oh, this. So fruits and tubers have been something we've always eaten. And then when you actually look at why, it just makes sense. Humans kind of naturally knew that, well, this is just what was available to us, for one thing. And for another thing, they were naturally lower in anti-nutrients. Like fruit, quote, wants to be eaten, right? The plant wants to spread its seed. So fruit does not have a lot of anti-nutrients in it. And tubers is, good source of energy, not tons of anti-nutrients, and it's something that's been available forever. So to recap that, we're just talking about whole foods, talking about animal foods, plus some fruits and tubers on the side. It's kind of paleo, but paleo doesn't well, it does include lots of legumes and weird stuff, or it doesn't include legumes. It just includes a lot of nuts and seeds and stuff that maybe do have a lot of anti-nutrients we're figuring out, and maybe aren't great for a lot of people, especially if you eat them all the time. And they also don't include dairy, which I think is wrong, because I think there's a huge difference between pasteurized, like, mass produced dairy and really good raw dairy or raw cheese or something made from, good animals on grass. So yeah, was that simple enough recap?
That's bang on. The one thing I wanted to touch on is because it's growing in popularity, and it almost, I don't want to say it's on the there's parts of it that are almost religious, like veganism, but like some people are so carnivore and like so adamant that like the vegan diet or like eating any plants is bad. But I think you mentioned it on another podcast the other day that if eating any plants was bad, then people would be, in far worse health condition, who are having a nice whole foods diet with plants involved. So I wonder if I can get your take on the carnivore diet, the extremes of the carnivore diet.
Yeah, I have that exact take. Like I said, things that disprove your theory, even anecdotally, are pretty powerful. And there's millions and billions of people around the world for I don't know how many years that have been pretty fine on plant heavy diets. There's actually none that have been like totally plant based. That's sort of a really new thing. And So yeah, I think the carnivore diet is kind of easily disproven, but I also think it's great and it's a good tool, really. I think a lot of diets are tools, and a lot of people just think of them as, oh, I tried this diet, it worked for me, and this is the truth. Or it's
Mm.
like, yeah, I studied the carnivore diet. It's, this guy on the internet said that, we ate meat for a million years, and I did it and I got better, and
Mm.
it's done. And story done. End of
Yeah.
story. That's not it. That's why I'm really trying to go beyond that and look at all of them and not get stuck in a camp, because it's just a lot of these diets are tools. Keto is great. It's fine. You could do good keto, you could do bad keto.
Mm.
You could say keto's a fad. You could say keto's been done for millions of years. And I think that it's all of those. It kind of is a fad, right? It is in the modern culture for the last 5 years. And now you go to a store and there's all these keto products, right? But that doesn't mean that keto is necessarily bad. You can eat in a ketogenic way, eating whole foods, animal foods, good animal fat, some fruits, and be totally fine. But then I also don't think you should do it forever. It's a good tool. Yeah, maybe you do have to go on this journey. And I've seen a lot of people do this journey where they use the different tools and they start out with carnivore, or they start with keto, or they start with paleo, and they do it for a while, and then they move to the next one, and they feel good, and it's great, right? Maybe they have to do carnivore because they're so metabolically damaged and their gut is so messed up that their gut needs a rest, and it doesn't want any plant foods that are just going to irritate it. So you do carnivore for 6 months and everything gets better. But then I think you need to move on, because I think people will have problems with electrolytes, or just not. I don't think carbs are like the enemy, right? It's just what kind of carbs we're talking about, and what is your metabolic state. So once you start healing your body and you start losing weight and you start doing better, carnivore, it can be great for that. And then it's like, okay, well, maybe we could just add in some more foods and just be like keto or something. And then maybe you could add in some more foods and basically just be sapient, which is what I call it, which is just eating the animal foods plus the low anti-nutrient whole foods.
Yeah.
Right. So you can go on that journey and use different tools along the way.
Exactly. And I think one of the main things that's confusing people and stopping them going on this journey, like you're talking about, and trying these different ways of their food, with keto or with paleo diet or carnivore diet, is this huge message in the fitness industry that losing weight is as simple, and getting healthy is as simple as calories in, calories out. And you mentioned it earlier, and I just want to get your take on why that is not correct.
Two huge things about that is incorrect. One is about protein, and one is about the level of processing. So protein has been studied a lot, and that is hard science that even the nutrition bros and the muscle bros on the internet will understand. So they'll tell you calories are not a calorie unless you equate for protein. So at least they're on that page, right? They understand that protein matters most, and it's not like other calories. And this is actually one of the big mistakes we got 50 years ago, 70 years ago, when we started doing these bad studies, when they made the food pyramid, when they made the My Plate, the Eat Well, whatever it's called. They're just like, hey, all calories are the same, so why not just eat like bread, like eat all these cheaper things that we have a lot of. A lot of it's just like, hey, we have millions of acres of corn, wheat, and soy, and let's just use these products, and it's cheaper, because a lot of times these governments have to pay. Well, all the time the governments have to pay for certain people's diet, right? Whether it's nursing homes or the schools or the military or wherever, hospitals. So they want the cheaper foods, and they're like, hey, well, if all calories are the same, let's just give them the bread. It's cheaper. And it has fiber, it's like, but it's like, no, it's not protein. Protein matters most. You have to have protein to build your body to live. It helps you be satiated. It helps every organ in your body. It helps your bones, to your organs, to your muscles, to everything. It's one of the most important things. A lot of people don't realize, if they're just counting calories and they're just reducing calories sort of arbitrarily, you're just getting even less protein, for one thing, and you could be losing muscle, not fat. So there's been studies on this too, where they had two different groups on different diets. It was pretty well controlled, and one group got adequate protein. It was in college age female athletes, actually, and one group got adequate protein, the other just cut calories. But they both were the same calorically, but one had adequate protein, one did not, right? And these two groups continued on the same exercise program. One group, they both lost weight. It was the interesting part. They both lost weight because, they kind of reduced calories. But the group with the adequate protein lost mostly fat, 90% fat. The group without lost mostly muscle. Wow. They didn't have enough protein. And so it's the crazy part. So they look at the scale. They're like, oh, each group lost 8 pounds on the scale, something around there. And so people are like, okay, great. I lost 8 pounds. Well, if you're in the low protein group, you lost 7 pounds of muscle. That's the exact opposite of what you want to do. You need muscle. It helps your metabolism. It's almost like a cheat code to life. It burns more calories for you, even when you're not in the gym. So muscle is super important for aging. Muscle is important for everything. So
and just while we're talking about protein, what's your take on animal versus plant protein?
Oh yeah. So they're not even close. Animal protein is way better. It's more bioavailable and complete. It has a complete spectrum of amino acids. It has them in the bioavailable form that your body needs. There's really no comparison. And it's so crazy again why they're demonizing animal protein when it's so important and so much better for us. And plant protein, people try to combine different proteins to maybe make up all the amino acids, right? Vegetarians like to use beans and rice, and they're like, hey, if we combine beans and rice, we get all of the amino acids. No, they're not. You actually don't, and you're actually barely getting enough protein, and you're getting far too many calories. Actually, if we want to talk about calories, if you're eating beans and rice, you'd have to eat like 4 times the calories to try to get the same amount of protein, and that's not good because most people need to eat less, right? They can't afford to eat all these extra calories to get the same amount of protein. You want, basically what we're talking about is nutrient density too, right? Animal foods have super high nutrient density. So your body wants nutrients to survive. And if you give them in a form, a package that has a bunch of extra fat or carbs in it, which is just energy, your body is going to have to burn off or store that extra energy. Right. So bread is an example of a very nutrient poor food. It's not nutrient dense because it has a very small amount of nutrients, but a lot of energy. So if you're just eating a diet or like the Eat Well guide, the food pyramid, all that stuff, you're eating a lot of extra energy and not that many nutrients. Your body just wants protein and nutrients, right? That's what it needs to survive and enough energy to survive. So if you give that's why food matters so much. If you eat foods that are actually nutrient dense, what your body wants, then you can eat the right amount, right? You eat them and you naturally are of the right body composition, and you naturally lose weight or you maintain weight because your body is getting what it needs. If you're eating,
I've seen studies that have shown that the body will naturally, will show hunger or give hunger signals until it reaches its protein threshold. It's just on a protein hunt, and it will keep you sort of driving to eat more food and find more nutrition until you hit that sort of that protein threshold.
Yeah, I love that. It's called the protein leverage hypothesis, and it's been studied for years and years and years, and they've found that all basically animals have that, and that they eat to a certain amount of protein. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say is if you eat a protein deficient diet, it's kind of like you're getting this amount of protein with a lot of extra stuff in it. And your body's going to keep eating that food until you get enough protein. And therefore, mathematically, you're going to eat too much, right? You're going to eat too many excess calories with excess energy. So I think that extends to the nutrient leverage hypothesis. So they just talk about protein. I think we need to add in nutrients too, because there's not as much science on this, but they've studied in animals where animals will eat. They do some controlled studies and they eat until they get enough nutrients. Like they'll make a sheep, I think it was like a sheep or something, deficient in magnesium or deficient in a mineral. And then they would study what it ate. And it did eat to get enough magnesium, right? It does. I think creatures know what to eat in the wild, right? And if you eat natural foods, they kind of naturally have the right amount of the protein and the nutrients that you will be okay. Yeah, and your body will be satisfied by eating them. And then of course, if you're eating a whole bunch of packaged food, nutrient deficient, just empty calories, just processed foods stuffed with sugar and flour and oil, which is what most things are, then of course you're not getting enough nutrients, and you have to just keep eating them. So on the high level, if you look at population wide, it's just slowly going up, right? It's slowly, just obesity and the disease goes along with that, just slowly moving up. Well, that's what they're mostly eating. It's a slow process where you just slowly eat these nutrient poor foods, and your body just has to eat too much of them, and you end up where we are.
And you think this drive against meat and this sort of move towards plant-based stuff and this sort of drive of veganism or plant-based nutrition in the media is solely due to profit, or what? Because I mean, in my mind, they can still make a lot of money off meat, right? Or is that not the case?
Not really. So I have a meat company, Nose to Tail. I don't make any money. Like, so far, I'm just breaking even because it's super expensive to grow meat, raise meat, get it to people. All Whole Foods have low profit margins. So there's no big carrot companies or big fruit, strawberry companies. There's some, I guess, if on a super high level, if you grow enough monocropped plants, you can make some money.
Yeah.
But really, there's no profit margin in those. So yeah, so I had a little meme and video I made called "The Profits in the Processing," and I used an example of a chicken. If you have a chicken breast, you're only going to make so much on a chicken breast. Say you have one chicken breast, you can make like 10 cents off. You can sell it for $1, but it maybe costs 90 cents to make. You made 10 cents. If you take a chicken breast and like grind it up to chicken nugget, add sugar, flour, oil on it, you can sell that for maybe it only costs you 10 cents, and you can sell it for $1. Huge profit margin on that when you add in the processing and the cheap ingredients. So yeah, I think a lot of it is to do with that profit margin, and it is money. And yeah, I don't know, you're kind of going back into like, do they want us fat and sick?
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those like happy accidents. Maybe I need a better term for the like sort of the happy accidents. Like, well, it's supposedly good for you. We think whole grains are good for you, and that's what everyone's been saying for so long. So, but we're gonna make so much money on all the healthcare and the pharmaceutical. There's all these other systems, and they're all kind of in bed together. I think where it's pushing each other.
And I noticed you had a couple of strikes on YouTube lately. What were they for?
Well, basically just interviewing doctors about their experience with COVID and other stuff like that. And I don't know. They dug up one from a full year ago. It was 11 months ago in November, and I just got a strike for it 2 days ago. And so now they say, if I get another strike in then 90 days, I'm going to lose my account. So I'm like, well, if you just dig up a video from a year ago, I think they're just going to do maybe in a week or two, just dig up another one and I'm done. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think I'm big enough that food companies are scared or, it's anything like that. Right. Because some people are like, oh, you're going to make this documentary exposing the food industry. Like, I don't know. I don't think maybe, once the film comes out and people will try to, I don't think I'm going to be invited on any mainstream news programs to talk about it because they're being funded by the big food companies. And I know that, and I know personal friends that got kicked off of shows, uninvited from shows by the advertisers. Basically, the advertisers found out what they were going to talk about, and they're like, "Oh, you can't have this guest."
Who was that in particular? Can you say?
Yeah, one of them was Maria Emmerich. She told me this. She told it on air. I mean, I can talk about it. She told the story on air on my podcast a couple years ago. But she's a pretty big keto influencer. She's an author. She does a lot of. She's pretty mainstream, uninvited from a TV program.
Wow. Because she was going to talk about keto and low carb and cutting out breakfast cereals and this sorts of stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Wow. And then they're like, the news program's like, well, our main advertiser is like breakfast cereal. We can't have this. So this, people don't really understand that this is how the world works. And I think there's another part of social media that well, I don't want to theorize too much on why they're blocking all this info, but a lot of this stuff with the past 2.5 years is coming out to the quote science is changing. And there's different things that are coming to light that I knew were correct the whole time, or I was on this is what my doctor friend that I interviewed that the video got taken down on. He was just saying stuff that we knew all along, and now it's coming out that it was true, yet they're still censoring it. So that's a whole nother rabbit hole, is how big tech and how this censorship is going on and what that's leading to.
Yeah, big tech, government, pharmaceutical companies, all sort of in collusion. And I mean, I've just, it's these memes that do the rounds, and it's like all of the major news channels with sponsored by Pfizer or sponsored by, like all of these different, and then you look at the board members, and all of the board members for the major media corporations are sitting on the boards of the major pharmaceutical corporations, and they're also, revolving door effect, used to work in government or are going to go back to government, and are just cycling around. So all these policies and you think, hang on, why have we got a policy to, increase the amount of taxation on meat now? All this stuff happening in Holland, which is really damaging for these farmers. These farmers are being taxed heavily on the amount of cattle they have now. And I think that's coming in New Zealand as well, and a few other places around the world. So all seems to, like you say, be a happy coincidence for many of these big companies who are selling, pharmaceuticals or, high sugar products, or, anything in between. And I just wonder, the beauty of the internet when it's not censored is that this information is able to disseminate. But from what you're saying now, all of these main things aren't being given the airtime that they should be.
Well, that's the thing. So not only are my posts removed and taken down, and so that was on YouTube, actually removed. On Instagram, my posts have been removed. I'm now blocked on Instagram. These are two separate companies, yet in the past week, I've been blocked on both of them in certain ways. So I can't even post my new podcast to YouTube for 2 weeks because I have the second strike. And on Instagram, no one can tag me anymore, and I can't post about certain things. So what I was going to say is, not only is information being removed, but also I have to self-censor. And I've seen this all around with other people, because this big new thing came out in the UN hearing, and they were, the representative from Pfizer said the vax wasn't tested for transmission. This is huge news. This should be worldwide news, because all of these, there's so many laws. It was like mandated that, and the idea was to stop transmission, that you're doing this. We need to mandate it to stop transmission. And then now they're saying it wasn't ever tested for transmission. It doesn't. Huge news. This should be absolute worldwide news.
Yeah.
No one's talking about, absolutely zero mainstream coverage. Of course it's not gonna be covered in mainstream. But then I noticed it wasn't even being covered on social media. Like, why aren't other people talking about it?
But perhaps it was being covered, but people kept getting strikes for it, and it kept getting taken down.
So I'm saying, so it's both. So people were trying to post it was getting taken down, or they're self-censoring.
Yeah.
So now I see my other friends, because I know we're all on the same page. I'm like, where are the posts about this? And they're like, I can't post about that. I already have 2 strikes. Or like, I'm already blocked on Instagram. If I post about that again, I'm out. And people don't understand, this is a lot of people's livelihood. Like, this kind of is my livelihood. Like, I have to have this Instagram. It's how, the only way I make money right now is with my nose to tail company. Like, the documentary, I'm losing money in the documentary. You know what I mean? I had to go away from the system, and the only outlet I have is to do content and allow people to find my nose to tail company. And so if I get kicked off of Instagram, I'm screwed.
Yeah. Do you have a Parler or a Substack or any of these other
Yeah,
means?
I've tried those. It's 1/10 to 100th to 1/1000th of the engagement. It's just nothing. It doesn't work. People, they have such a monopoly on these big social networks. Yeah, it's like, it's just not worth it. I try. Yeah, I mean, people it's like, oh, post your podcast to Rumble. I'm like, it's fine. There's going to be like 30 people watching it.
Yeah. It's just not enough. They know that they've got that stranglehold on information dissemination, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify have been pretty good, but I remember when the whole Rogan thing kicked off, when he was giving platforms to, I think it was uh, Dr.
Dr. Robert
Malone.
Malone
Dr.
and
Malone, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And then they started, there was all this outcry, like, it's false information, and they had to put these sort of COVID warning signs on their podcast. But so they at least allowed the information to go through. But many of this is cross-platform stuff. You put it on Spotify, and then you upload it to YouTube as well, and then you upload it to Instagram as well. So like you can't censor one without censoring the others. So I mean, I don't know where it goes from here. Do you think it's going to wind down or wind up?
I think we're on this constant slow progression towards the book 1984. If anyone's read that, this dystopian future, I think they might do 2 steps forward, 1 step back type of thing. And I don't like saying they, but I think there is a they, and because everything has been headed this direction for a long time. And yeah, I just think that they are trying to wrangle a whole bunch of people. I sometimes use this analogy of of kindergarten, and you have the principal, and you have some teachers, and you have a bunch of rugrats running around. You know what I mean? It's like a daycare center, and they're just trying to manage a bunch of rugrats running around. And then it's just kind of like the teachers have the rules, and the principal makes the rules for the teachers, and it's just handed down, and they're trying to get through their day. They're trying to, not get stressed out and lose their mind, and they're trying to, make them take a nap.
Families and stuff. And
yeah, they have their own life. They're just like, man, we got to get these kids to take a nap. We got to keep them in line. We got, all these things. They're just trying to wrangle a bunch of people on the highest level. I think that is kind of just what's going on in the world. And it'd be easier. I think if you go beyond money and power, I think it would just be easier to try to run the countries in the world. And I'm not saying it's, like all one person doing this, but even all these different leaders, they're just trying to manage the masses. And it's a lot easier if you have more rules. If you look at all the measures, every year there's more taxes, there's more rules with travel, like the TSA in America, right? These different, all these security measures taken that we just keep losing our freedoms, right? It's a slow march of like, there's just more regulations, more freedoms lost, more control. You get to social credit scores, like I think what we're headed to is, like carbon taxes, meat taxes, social credit scores, like all this stuff. It's kind of headed that way of people. Oh, there's contact tracing apps, or there's, this. Yeah. And it's supposed to be for your own good. It's like, oh, well, we need these contact tracing apps because it's going to help you protect people from COVID. Yeah. So and then it's like, hey, what's next?
All done under the guise of, public health and sustainability. And I wanted to touch on sustainability because there's so much demonization, so much of the demonization of meat and animal products comes around the sustainability aspect. And I wonder if you can touch on a little bit about, how it's not the product that is the issue. It's not the actual food item that is the issue. It's a method of production. And, some of the plant agriculture stuff is just as damaging and kills many animals as well. So, I mean, I wonder if you can touch on that. You've got your meat company and how you see the sort of the production of even whole foods.
Yeah, it's a huge topic, and it does play into what's going on in the future. And I'm really scared of this overregulation and carbon tax and stuff like that, because I do believe 100% that it's how you raise the animals and how you raise the plants that matters. But I just want to be careful because then they can co-opt that. I think that's what's going on, I think. And then what you see in Holland, what you see around the world is so they're taking these things like, well, we need to, reverse climate change. We need to like think about the CO2. We need to do all these things. So we're going to put in this carbon tax, and then we're going to get rid of farm, stuff like that. So they're kind of using that to their advantage. And I think that is a big thing that's going to affect our future. And I'm really scared about, but we do need to raise things better. And it is important, and animals can help the environment. And if we're talking about CO2 or methane or that type of thing, that's a long story. But cows, ruminant animals, eat low quality plant foods that we can't eat, like grass, and they naturally have been putting out methane forever, and it's never been a problem. And that is a part of a natural cycle that goes up into the atmosphere and then turns into CO2 and then feeds the plants again. This is a perfectly natural cycle that is not the problem. The problem is all the other big industries that they are trying to distract you from. It's all the other industries. What about the healthcare industry? Healthcare industry has way more emissions. If you think of all the money and energy spent doing all the healthcare, way more than animal agriculture. So the big problem is this sort of just, yeah, if you're talking about carbon specifically, the one-way street of carbon, like being pulled up from the ground and putting into the air, which still is a deeper discussion. But that's very different from animal agriculture that just cycles natural CO2 and methane. So talking about the deaths, good studies out of Australia showing there's more deaths per calorie or per unit of measurement with corn and wheat and these monocropped plant foods than there is with animal agriculture. So animals die in all areas of production, from clearing out land and you wipe out entire ecosystems to actually killing them in the process of harvesting them with the combines. And these are like ground nesting squirrels and little baby deer and birds, or sorry, ground nesting birds and squirrels and deer and all these things. All their animals are poisoned. Other animals are shot. Farmers have to pay hunters to like for animal control that actually just kill animals. And then they also die once you harvest the crops. They starve to death. You had thousands and hundreds of thousands of mice that were relying on all of these grains, and then you take them all away, they starve to death. So there's no way to do all this agriculture of plant or animals without killing something. That's just how the world works. For us to live, something must die. So yeah, like vegans like to say these arguments, and they actually don't pan out when you really study them. And really, they think that they're morally superior because they don't choose to directly kill an animal for their food. But that doesn't make it better that they're just ignoring all the death that goes into creating their foods.
Yeah. So even the moralistic standpoint doesn't stand up.
It doesn't work. I mean, you can put your head in the sand and pretend it doesn't happen, but it's still happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I've actually seen a wave of, maybe it's because of the internet and maybe it's just because what I've been searching for lately, but a wave of people who've gone to veganism and now have rolled back, and they're sort of sounding the alarm about it, saying, I was depressed, I was moving in the direction of osteoporosis, weak bones, weak muscles, all of this stuff that comes about from being nutrient deficient. And, they're ringing the alarm about it.
It's great. And it's a revolving door. Veganism is basically just, what are the influencers that are in their honeymoon period at the moment, right? And this honeymoon period is when you do any diet, you make any intentional dietary change, you're going to do better. You're going to focus on your health and probably do better. And also with veganism, you're eating more whole foods. You're giving up a whole bunch of processed foods and being intentional on eating more whole foods. Great. But it's really this revolving door of people who feel better in the short term, want to tell the world, and then all the nutrient deficiencies catch up, and protein deficiencies or other problems. So many gut problems, so many problems with autoimmune and gut issues or mental issues. Like a lot of this, oh man, it's crazy, because these plant foods just attack your system, really. Like especially these new plant foods are grown with pesticides and all this stuff. They are not easy on your gut and just ruining people's health. And I'm glad that people are speaking out, that are coming on the other side of it. But I just want people to know that it is this revolving door. There's studies about how many 84% or something, who go vegetarian or vegan just come back. And so it's just a not human diet. And there's just a few people that are always just spreading the word temporarily.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's exactly what I've seen. It's like, and when I tried it, I think I felt okay for a couple of days. And then my body was like, look, what are you doing? This is this is crazy. I mean, if if you are to, I mean, when does the documentary come out? When do you think you're going to be
Oh,
finished?
we don't know. We're trying to finish it by the end of the year, early next year. It'll
Yeah.
take a while to get out to Netflix, was where we want it.
Okay. And are you doing funding for this, or you're getting funding from Netflix, or how's your
Oh
funding
no.
working?
It's all crowdfunded. Yeah,
Yeah.
if people go to foodlies.org, you can contribute to the Indiegogo campaign. So yeah, it's all self-funded. We did have a private individual give us a good amount of money because he just wanted to see it made, but we have no outside funding at all.
Okay, that's good. And yeah, because I heard you talking about, and people talking about the Game Changers funding that was huge industry funding, and that's whenever I say anything about, I'm quite adamant on red meat being a great thing to base your diet around. And people say you need to watch the Game Changers documentary, and you need to watch, What the Health, and you need to watch all these documentaries. And I'm thinking like, I don't have the time to go into this with you on a comment on Instagram. So it's good to know that you don't have crazy industry backers.
It would be nice. I wouldn't take it. Even if it's something I believed in, I still wouldn't take it because for one, people would just think that was changing, my views or making me biased towards something. Right. So even, if the meat industry was like, I love this, you have a good message. Here's like $1 million. I wouldn't take it. I would not take it. It would ruin the whole thing. Right.
Muddies the water.
Yeah.
So, but mate, thank you so much for coming on today. We're going to wrap it up now. But if people want to find more info about you, if they want to find more information about the documentary and your Instagram accounts and stuff, and even if you get blocked, where can people go?
Well, go to Food Lies. Just search for Food Lies on any platform, and theoretically I'll be there. And if I'm not, I guess I'll keep going to different platforms. And I always will just be under Food Lies, and that's the best thing you can do. I guess you can also go to sapien.org and join the newsletter. I don't push my newsletter much, but I've been putting it out once a week and just providing, some content, a little bit of good information. And that's a good way that, connect directly to people and not have to rely on big tech.
Definitely. I love it. Anyway, mate, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm looking forward to seeing the doc when it comes out.
All right. Good stuff. Thanks, man.
Thanks, mate.